Thank you for joining Reclaiming My Life podcast today. Today we are talking with Mary Byler, and she is the author of Reflections and Memoirs of an Amish Misfit. And we're going to talk with her today about her book and it just about some of the experiences that she's had in her life. And um, we're just going to dig deep into everything that she would like to share with us today. Hey, Mary, how are you?
Hi, Diane. How are you? I'm great, but how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. So, so like I said, I read your book. We were talking about that, and that you've got another book in the works, and I just want you just just talk to me. What do you want to tell me?
Well, uh, I was born in America, but I wasn't born in dominant culture America. And I think if you read the book, you probably got that idea. English is my second language.
Hmm.
I've spent 20 years of my life trying to understand what happened and why and how we can prevent that from happening to other people. And that it led me on this journey of deconstruction and like just exploring different
Yeah.
churches. I went to so many different churches in my early 20s. It was
Hmm.
like, are you for real though? The last time I went to a church service seeking spiritual guidance, this is what happened. I went to a church service in 2007, in
Uh-huh.
December 2007.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and the pastor was up there on the pulpit and he was saying all this stuff. And I was just like, is he for real? Like, he's really saying it's women's fault? Like, I walked out mid service. I was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not, bro. I'm not interested. If that's what you're selling, I'm not buying it.
Yeah. Well, I
But
mean you
I
still.
still consider myself like spiritual for many years, and
Hmm.
I wasn't really able to say I'm an atheist until like the last, like, I would say 5 years.
Okay. So you started deconstructing it. Was it 2004? You said?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So
But
I'm not gonna say that.
really,
Go ahead.
I was already questioning the Bible. If you read my book, I was already
Yeah.
questioning the Bible as a teenager, like maybe 13, 14 years old.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about the book.
Okay.
Um, so you went through a lot. You went through a lot. There was a lot of abuse. I don't know how much you want to share with us tonight on here on this platform, but it was a lot. It wasn't an easy read for sure. And so I mean, how much of that do you want to share with us tonight?
Well, we can just say that I was born and raised Amish, but I lived in 5 different Amish settlements and I escaped in 2004. And when I reported the abuse that I had experienced, there were 5 people arrested and prosecuted, and they all pled guilty for crimes they committed against children, and they were all Amish. There
Mm-hmm.
were other people in another state that were never prosecuted, even though they admitted what they did.
Mm-hmm. So why weren't they prosecuted?
I don't feel like I have the emotional capacity
Okay.
to discuss that.
Okay.
It
Fair
is
enough.
very traumatic
Mm-hmm.
the way that sometimes people who are being abused get treated when they come from certain people groups.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, you have this narrative about Amish people that's like, oh, they're the peaceful, gentle people. People
Yeah.
external to us often extol the virtues of Amish forgiveness. Look at the nickel mine school shooting that happened in 2007. They even made a movie called Amish Grace out of it because it's all so beautiful. They're so
Mm-hmm.
holy with their forgiveness. But here's the question that I have for people is when you extol the virtues of a certain group so much so that you cannot even begin to investigate crimes potentially committed by that people group.
Yeah.
What does it say about you? And then when you have people like, for example, a child, Jessica Mast, I would like to dedicate this appearance to Jessica Mast. She was a 4-year-old child of people that were raised in Anabaptist churches who were taught to spare the rod is to spoil the child.
Mm-hmm.
This 4-year-old child was murdered, brutally murdered by 4 adults because they said she had a demon possession,
Mm-hmm.
beaten to death. And we are still waiting to see a sentencing for the perpetrators of the people that decided that it was their holy job to beat the demon out of her.
Yeah.
She was 4 years old. It happened December 20th, 2004, I think is when I found out.
Yeah.
Sorry, 2020, not 2004,
2020.
2020.
2020.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awful. That is awful.
So when my people are being killed, when children are being killed because of the fact that you look the other way, what does that
Mm.
say about you?
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, there is that misconception about the Amish. I mean, that's always been my misconception. It was just that that the Amish are just very gentle and kind people, and raising up their families in this, separated from all the craziness of the world, and it's just you just have this um, misguided uh, idea of what it is, and it's horrible that what you had to go through, and the child that you mentioned. Tell me her name again.
Jessica Mast.
Jessica Mass. Yes, that's awful that you all that she had to suffer that way. And so when you 2004 is when you left, and that's when your deconstruction started. But you said you had questions even before that, because obviously I'm sure you felt like, why would a good God allow me to have to go through these things that I'm going through?
Yeah, definitely nailed that. I did.
Yeah.
I did definitely wonder why a good God would do that, and so that's why I was reading the Bible. And then when I had questions about the Bible, of course, it's because you know I never understood. There were two things that really stuck out to me, and one was Deuteronomy. I forget chapter and verse off the top of my head, but it's where they talk about if a woman is raped, if
Hmm.
she screamed, then she shouldn't be put to death. But if she didn't scream, then she should be put to death. And I
Hmm.
was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah. The Bible, I've had several discussions lately about how the Bible basically condones rape um, in many ways. And so yeah, that's that makes it very difficult, like I said, to believe in a good God when you um, experience these bad, horrible things, and then you read the Bible, and there's all these things in the Bible that's condoning, because these people are behaving this way because their interpretation of the Bible is what makes them feel justified in doing the things that they do. Do you agree?
Actually, I write about that in this book that I'm writing. It's like kind of like how like your interpretation of this Bible, you've recreated God in your image.
Yeah.
You've determined that it is justifiable to dehumanize people and to villainize people and to treat people as lesser than because they're not part of the um that that word the broader, like you're not part of the broader collective, the most powerful within the group. So
Hmm.
when you start considering how there's the patriarchal privilege, like
Hmm.
the story of David and Bathsheba, that
Yeah.
is horrendous. And that
Hmm.
often gets preached about in such a positive way. Oh,
Yeah.
this is such a feel good story. But is it really a feel good story? Bathsheba was just out. Like we use Lutheran Bibles. I still have a High German Lutheran Bible.
Hmm.
And there's nothing is ever mentioned in that Bible. Like when I read that portion of the Bible, nothing is ever mentioned about like Bathsheba ever being able to consent to what he was doing. It's like King David, he was out there on the rooftop, he's being a peeping Tom.
Right. Right.
And if I'm sorry, but if you have a peeping Tom, what you gonna do?
You're gonna call the police.
You're
You're
gonna
not
be
gonna
like,
you're not gonna
no,
marry him.
we not gonna do that, right?
Yeah.
And then the punishment is to kill his child with her.
Hmm.
So you killed a rapist baby, which might have been a blessing for her. And then
Hmm.
you get reward him by giving him the woman. It's very clear that the Bible condones ownership of
Hmm.
women's
Hmm.
bodies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Um, it does. It everything. It's the Bible is very patriarchal. It's absolutely written by a bunch of men because there's nothing in it for us at all. It's all about us being owned, and I don't know if I should. Can it's not TikTok, so I guess we can say rape on here, right? I know.
I mean, but YouTube does also mess with your algorithms a little bit. I just don't care as a podcaster myself. Like, I
Right.
don't care. And I
Right.
do it anyways
Uh,
because it is important that we
It is
name certain
important.
things. And there's some things I'm willing to name.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think it is very important that we name the violence that was perpetrated against us, our mothers, our grandmothers, and potentially will be perpetrated against our children and our grandchildren. It is
Hmm.
important because unless we name that violence, we can't even begin to address it. And when it's rooted in biblical holiness and it's sanctioned by your so-called loving and just God,
Yeah.
that's why the Bible matters in this context. I've
Hmm.
heard from people for a long time. I've been listening to people tell me, well, it wasn't because of their beliefs, but really, actually, some of the things that I experienced was in fact justified by their beliefs. When
Right.
you have entire groups of people teaching people that to love their children is to beat them,
Yeah.
when you have people teaching other people that to love their children is to shun them,
Hmm.
you are teaching people that love is transactional. You are teaching people that their children need to be dominated into submission and obedience.
Yeah.
They need to be beaten until the blood runs down their leg. That is literally stories I heard preached as I grew up.
Mm. Wow.
That is a problem. And when it's justified by your book,
Hmm.
that's when it's really something that we need to perhaps sit with the discomfort rather than just objecting and derailing the conversations.
Right. Right. So since you left, what tell me a little bit about your life once you ran away, once you got free.
Well, I went through the court cases
Hmm.
and then I moved away. I lived about 2.5 hours from where it happened for a while. And then in 2006, I actually joined the Army to get away from the stalking and harassment that I continue to experience.
Hmm.
Uh, I can say that that is not an isolated incident. It is far too common for people who escape and report abuse to be stalked and harassed by their
Right.
communities of origin.
Hmm.
I'm not the only one. I just can't talk about other people's stories, so
Right. Right.
I'm telling you about mine.
Right.
They found me 2.5 hours away in a gas station.
Hmm.
So I joined the Army, and the Army got me out of there. And then that was a very short lived stint. I got chaptered out of the Army. Well, because I was pregnant
Hmm.
and I didn't have a family care plan. They call it's a chapter 8. And so I got
Yeah.
chaptered out of the Army, but I was married to somebody in the military. We had a child together. Um, I've lived for anywhere from New York to California, and I lived in Germany for 5 years, and now I live in Colorado. And
Hmm.
I've traveled to about a dozen different countries.
Hmm. So did you? So is that? Are you still? You're still married, or you're not still married?
I'm divorced,
Yeah.
thank goodness. sometimes you just got to get rid of some of that extra baggage you've been carrying around or the extra weight or yeah.
Mhm. So, what have you done to help you heal from what you've gone through?
Where do you want to start?
Start from the beginning.
So back in 2003, while I was still in the church, I had reached out to a friend, a family friend who was a driver, and I had known this man for years. And he was instrumental in ensuring that I was able to access resources. But here's a thing that he did for me. Uh, he asked me, because I wouldn't talk to him until he promised me he wouldn't tell anybody in the church. He wouldn't tell a single person. If you tell my family, if you tell anybody in the church, if you tell anybody outside the church, like that's no. But he promised me he wouldn't. So I told him about some of the physical abuse. And he asked me if he could talk to his girlfriend about it. And I said, sure. He went and talked to his girlfriend about it. The two of them connected me with a crisis intervention center.
Mhm.
And at the crisis intervention center, they provided EMDR therapy.
Mhm.
And him and his friends provided me with transportation to the EMDR therapy. That was the beginning of a journey.
Yeah.
And other people also stepped up when they realized, other former plane people also stepped up when they realized what was going on.
Mhm.
Uh, I also attended some women's groups for people who have experienced interpersonal and domestic violence and
Mhm.
things like that. That was eye opening and very, very helpful.
Mhm.
And I started with the help of this counselor, this actually qualified trauma therapist, writing.
Yeah. So, so I'm sure the book was very therapeutic for you, just to write the book.
Well, I mean, the very first page I wrote, I mean, it was just fuck you. That was it. That was it.
Yeah.
And then I burned like all of my writings back in 2014 because I was just like, well, that's a bunch of BS. I'm tired of it. I'm gonna burn it.
Mhm.
Well, I shouldn't say all of them, but I burned a lot of my writings in 2014. I had stacks of books,
Wow.
and then
And you
I
just burn it all.
sometimes you got to get rid of the baggage.
Yeah.
You just got to be like, bye.
Hmm. But just writing in general can be therapeutic, even if you're not going to share it with anybody.
Exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. So writing, and then another thing was is even while I was still in the church, like I had a harmonica and I played harmonica. That was part of my coping skills. Like
Hmm.
not now to be clear, um, not every Amish community allows harmonicas, but I lived in five, so some of them did and some of them didn't.
Yeah.
Another thing is we were not allowed to sing along to the harmonica, just so you know. And
Yeah.
even if we tapped our legs too fast with it, well, that could have been just a slippery slope. It's probably where it all went wrong for me.
Wow. Hmm.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Um, and then I would say chronologically, I'm trying to sort some of this out. But drawing was another thing that I learned even as a young child.
What time is it? Is that a 7 o'clock?
5 o'clock.
Oh, that's right. It's 5 o'clock
Yeah,
there.
5 o'clock for me. I grew up with a clock like that. What can I say?
Okay.
Yeah. Uh, but drawing was something, and I wrote about this in my book, and I don't know if you saw it or if you understood what I was saying, but because English is my second language, but I wrote my book in a very intentional way. Like this page in my book,
Mhm.
that's in my New Testament that I still have. That I drew that as a kid because that's always been an outlet for me is to
Yeah.
draw things, even if it's not like the same type of art. Like we have very distinctive things that we do. Our culture is kind of like a counter to dominant culture in many ways. And
Mhm.
so going into dominant culture was a culture shock.
I
It
bet.
felt very, very, very freeing, but it also felt like I was in a on a whole new planet.
Yeah.
And that's why I say I was born in America, but I wasn't
Mhm.
born in like the America that people think of.
Right. Yes. I could. Yeah. Very much. Very very different. Um.
And
So
and
go ahead.
then at one point in time I had a friend who asked me to make an Amish doll. And I was like, I don't know that I want to.
Mhm.
Because if you've ever seen like the older Amish dolls, like the one I showed in my book, they're
Mhm.
faceless.
Mhm.
And when I say the faceless doll, we used to call it a bop. So she asked me to make it. It took a lot of work to be able to reconcile that this part of my life that was so traumatic because I was a small child when my mom took my doll and threw it in the living room stove in front of me because I
Yeah.
was too old to play with dolls.
Yeah.
And now I should be working, and
Yeah.
that's it. But these dolls, when you really think about it, they have no eyes, so they cannot see. They have no ears, so they cannot hear. They have no nose, so they cannot smell. And they have no mouth, so they cannot speak. And
Mhm.
what better depiction is that
Yeah.
of the space that I was in as a child?
Yeah.
But here's what me and my friends did. I remade the doll for my friend, but then I made a doll for me. And me and my friends took washable markers and we gave them faces. We gave
Mhm.
them hair. We gave them mouths. We gave them
Mhm.
noses and eyes and ears and different clothing.
Yeah.
And we gave them names. And then we also did a photo shoot, kind of like one of them is like depicting the shunning with these dolls.
Mhm.
And one of them is like, oh, here's my first airplane ride. Or here's this. Like all of
Mhm.
the little cultural things, even like right down to the spankings and the way that people would hit their children in love. Like it was an incredible work of art
Yeah.
that took the things that they used to oppress us and harm us and to justify harming us
Mhm.
and told a story.
Yeah.
Those are on my Mary Byler Facebook page for the
Yeah.
record. There's a
Yeah.
whole album of them.
I need to find you. I need to follow you on Facebook. And
And
you're very
then,
oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
No,
Go
I was just
ahead.
gonna say just how your strength and your resilience is amazing. You know,
Uh,
because you moved past that, and then you're using some of the things that were used against you, to help you to heal, and that's amazing. That's very shows a lot of strength in that.
well, there's so much more
Hmm.
because here's part of the problem. When we leave, when we escape, when we become non-practicing, they tell us we are no longer Amish and we can't talk about Amish stuff.
Hmm.
When you get baptized, I made a promise I would never tell church business to outsiders, but here I am doing it anyways. But also, think about this. When they tell us that we can't talk about stuff, we can't say we're Amish, we can't whatever. But we were raised in an environment that taught us the oral history of Amish people for almost 400 years because since 1693, When the Amish people, as we know them now,
Mm-hmm.
broke away from the Mennonites. No, we are not Mennonites. Our culture is distinctly different from Mennonite culture
Mm-hmm.
in many ways. And that history gets handed down to us orally. And we are taught that to be born Amish is a privilege, it is a covenant, a sacred covenant that is given to you from God.
Mm-hmm.
And while we don't go out and proselytize because we don't recruit members, we're not recruiters.
You have to be born in it.
You have to be born in it.
Yeah.
But the people who do not follow the Amish way, it's as if they're taking that sacred covenant that was gifted to them by God and they are stepping on it. It is a disgrace, and they have fallen from the Amish way, and we just don't know that there's any hope for them to go to heaven
Yeah.
because we also didn't believe in the absolution of salvation. And it is worse for somebody to be born in the Amish church and leave it than it is for somebody in the world, because we did hear preachings about how some people in the world might make it to heaven.
Hmm.
But it's worse for somebody who is born Amish to go out into the world and live a worldly life because we were taught better. We were taught the Amish way,
Yeah. Yeah.
the right way.
The right way. Everybody thinks their way is
And
the right way.
isn't it interesting how many different groups have the right way?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then that takes away from the fact that some of us, because of the fact that we have had a lack of adequate supply of new blood introduced into our communities for almost 400 years, there is an entire genetic disorder database that is specific to Amish, Old Order
Mhm.
Mennonites, and Hutterites. We have our own genetic disorders.
Really?
Yeah, it's on NIMH.
Hmm.
I can send you a link for it if you want.
Okay.
But ultimately, that is taking away. So, why taking away our ability to even talk about our heritage or talk about our life experiences with
Mhm.
authenticity and truth when you're saying, oh, you can't say anything about the Amish, you can't say that you're Amish? Well, guess what? I was still born Amish. Genetically, I still live with
Yeah.
those consequences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Furthermore, when I had genetics counseling while I was pregnant because I had complications,
Hmm.
it was enlightening, and I didn't even believe the geneticist. But I went and looked up what she told me to look up, and the geneticist was right.
Yeah.
That's how I found out about this database, by
Yeah.
the way.
Wow.
The point is you can take somebody out of the Amish, but you cannot take away the genetic consequences
Yeah.
and the culture that we grew up in versus the culture that we assimilate into. Sometimes it just feels like I don't belong anywhere.
Mm.
And using English as a second language and the way that people talk about us is sometimes so dehumanizing.
Hmm.
It just makes me feel like, are we even speaking the same English right now?
Hmm.
And because of Wisconsin versus Yoder and the fact that Amish people shun and abhor higher education for the most part, there might be some Amish Mennonites that might go to college, but primarily most Amish people don't go to college. They have an eighth grade education because of Wisconsin versus Yoder. There are some, not many, Amish people that go to public schools, but that can also lead to problems. So,
Hmm.
what we often hear when we talk, and I myself have heard this quite often, it's like, oh, you're so articulate. Uh, do you sense
They
any
don't
problems
expect you to
with that?
be. Is that yeah?
Do
So
you sense any problems with that? It's
yeah,
like as if like because we speak English as a second language and because we come from a different culture, automatically we're dumb.
yeah, yeah.
Automatically. And then we have researchers, like you were talking about the perception you didn't know. We have researchers who literally publish things that suggest and say Amish are not often in the practice of employing abstract or critical thinking or even self reflection. No, that is you being culturally incompetent.
Right.
That's what that is. But
Hmm.
the first time I read that, I said, did she say, are you saying we're stupid?
Hmm.
But I mean, I was informed the correct terminology would be she's suggesting that Amish people are cognitively impaired because she's culturally incompetent.
Yeah. I guess when you don't know something, you just make stuff up. It's like
Yeah.
yeah, they don't really know, and so they just kind of try to figure it out for themselves.
Well, and one of the things that really cracks me up is that, these, so it's by design. Like the narrative is by design because when you think about it, and you know more facts, the more you know, right?
Hmm.
So if you didn't know, I bet you didn't know that there's like researchers that publish stuff like that about Amish people.
I
I'd
didn't.
venture to guess. Yeah. Well,
Hmm.
I have the article. Anyways,
Hmm.
um, it's by design. Media has maintained a narrative that is profitable. Being Amish is a religion, it's a different culture,
Hmm.
but it's also a business. And
Yeah.
this is part of their branding. And hear me out when I say it's a business. In Lancaster County, PA alone, in 1 year, estimated tourism dollars 2.4 billion.
For.
So who is profiting from this narrative
Hmm.
about Amish people? And would people be so willing to go ride double-decker buses if these stories of horrendous crimes would be more widely circulated?
Hmm. So you said this money that's being made, you said in Pennsylvania.
One county in Pennsylvania.
So what is the tourism? What is the?
People literally go out to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania to do Amish tourism.
Mhm.
They
So
ride double decker buses, they go out for buggy rides, they go out, they even have a park, an amusement park that's PA Dutch. They have
mhm,
restaurants, they have all kinds of tourist traps, whatever. There's festivals in Pennsylvania too, where they basically try to depict Amish ways of life, but they're so incompetent in how they display it. Like they had the covering was
mhm.
on upside down and backwards.
So who? So this is really is not affiliated with any Amish community. This is just
Oh, it is Lancaster
oh
County Amish.
oh.
But when the economy benefits from it, when state tax revenue depends on it, when
Hmm.
local city and county revenue depends on it,
Yeah,
why
yeah.
would talking about the crimes or
Hmm.
even circulating some of these horrendous stories to have people understand that Amish are just people? Some of them
Hmm.
commit crimes. They're
Yeah.
capable of crimes just like any other group of people.
Hmm. So do you feel that the communities that you were in and the tragedies that you um, had to deal with, do you feel like that speaks to the majority of Amish communities?
As far as the CSA, when you talk about CSA, I have literally been listening to Amish survivors of CSA since I was a 12-year-old.
Mm,
I can't count the amount of communities, I can't count the amount of survivors, but those stories are not mine to tell.
right, right.
Mm.
And that just
And I
like,
also co wrote a research study with Tara Mitchell where we uh, had asked people within religious communities, not just Amish, but Mennonite, Plain communities, and conservative religious backgrounds, if they had experienced CSA. And about 47% of the people, so about 1 in 2 of the people who responded to that survey, had experienced CSA.
yeah,
And there were all kinds of religious groups there, not just Amish, not
yeah.
just Mennonites, not just Baptists, not just Methodist, not just, yeah.
Hmm. And this likely goes back to what we were saying earlier, in that um, because of the Bible and women being portrayed as property, that kind of gives the okay, that kind of makes it okay um, for women to be treated that way. Women and children, we don't have a voice. We don't matter. We don't count.
Well, as long as our vote is the same as the men in charge of us, we're being good, godly women, right?
Mhm.
Pretty
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
I think that when you start talking about the subjugation and oppression of people, part of it is always rooted in biblical white supremacy.
Hmm.
And part of what has really, really caused me a ton of distress is this. I grew up in homes and schools and places where we normalized use of the N word.
Hmm.
I had no idea. But one of the things that I even saw and have heard from people is that, well, Amish people are not racist. Um, Actually, yes, 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 they are. I'm not saying they're all racist. I'm saying they ascribe to
So
practices and
collectively,
collectively they have teachings that are racist.
mm-hmm.
Furthermore, I've had people tell me that Amish are not colonizers. Yeah, we actually benefited from colonization.
Mm-hmm.
Stop it. Stop pretending like we didn't participate in that. We did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in this little book that I'm writing that I'm calling Jezebel's Justice, I am trying to touch a little bit on that
Mm-hmm.
because I grew up in environments where people normalize that use. I've had people who escape, who reach out to me, who I've had to sit them down and have the conversation with them. You will not do this. You're not going to go around and say the N word in our language and think I'm going to let it slide.
Mm-hmm.
Not in my space. I don't have, I just don't have any patience left for it
Yeah.
because I've heard everything from you just have a bad interpretation of that word. No, actually, tell me what it means then.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't. I've had people say, well, it doesn't really mean what you say it means. Yeah, actually, it does.
Mm-hmm.
There are Amish parents that literally use the N word to describe their children as a slur.
Mm-hmm.
So quit your crap. because all you're doing right now is deflecting, delaying, and refusing to have the conversation about that word.
Yeah.
And part of what I hope happens is that I hope women read this, and I hope that they understand that proximity to power does not grant you some kind of special safety. At the end of the day, a bear is still a bear.
Yeah.
And if you it does not protect you. It does not keep you safe. It does not give you some special privilege where you don't experience those things. Because who do you think they're going to go after when they have already done what they wanted to all the minorities?
Yeah. Right. So, have you have you what have you done as far as reaching back since you've been free?
Well, when you say reaching back, what do you mean?
I mean, as far as helping others that have gone, have you helped anybody else that is still in there? Or have you helped any that are trying to get out or have gotten out?
It is very dangerous to talk about helping Amish people escape.
Okay, I understand.
However, comma pause in 2021. My friend Jasper and I, Jasper hosts a podcast called the Plain People's Podcast. And we got together a group of people. There was like a dozen of us who went to an Amish abuse awareness meeting. We made notes collectively. We created some resources talking about how to report abuse. We've disseminated over 1,000 copies. Currently in the works as a fellowship recipient of the Borgnew Fellowship from the Rights and Religious Forum, uh, where they're going to fund and help us fund more how to report booklets to circulate in various Amish places and spaces.
Hmm.
That's been a work of love because it's partially like this thing of, we have to understand the language that people use. And we
Yeah.
have to understand how they receive information
Hmm.
best. And we have to make sure that it reaches them where they are. To have people be able to report abuse is important.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like create a special phone line to non qualified people that don't actually have never been taught how to investigate or do anything. I'm saying like you need to actually call Childline. In the United States, we have this thing called Childline. You need to call
Hmm.
Childline. If you think you know or suspect that a child is being abused, you need to call and report it. You can do it anonymously, but you need to do it.
Yeah.
And there's other brochures that we've made that talk about statute of limitations, types of abuse, and right to privacy.
Hmm.
Because part of what often happens in high control groups, regardless of what type of high control group is there is a lack of privacy. There's a lack of understanding of consent and bodily autonomy and personhood. So
Hmm.
let's talk about it.
Right. Yeah. And just talking with you today, I asked you that question because I knew
You
I knew
knew.
you did something.
Well, and I also host a podcast where we have conversations with people from many different walks and ways of life. But um,
Okay.
because I host it, it's kind of like I talk about Amish stuff because
Yeah,
I'm still like, sorting out some of the things. But also,
absolutely. Hmm.
um, we
Hmm.
talk a lot about trauma on that podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, doing this podcast is therapeutic for me because I want to talk about, you know, my deconstruction and whatnot. And it's just, I enjoy talking with others about it because it's not something I could just talk about at home. So I enjoy reaching out to other people and hearing other people's stories and getting input and learning, from other people as well. I learn a lot. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if I think I told you Deborah Grace was the one that told me
Yes.
about you. Yeah. So she was
Yeah.
my second interview.
Deborah Grace is amazing.
Yeah, she is great. She is
Her book,
great.
Crucifying the Bible, if you're
Mhm.
deconstructing, I highly recommend it.
Yes, yes. I just gave my copy to a family member a couple of days ago uh, to try to help them through their process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's really important to just have like factual information, you
it
know?
is. Absolutely is. I make T-shirts and hoodies and things like that. I have a print business, and one of the shirts I made it says "Facts over Faith" because I'd rather know the truth than just to have blind faith.
Yeah. I'm a I'm a big fan of that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Facts over faith. I think it's really interesting sometimes, like how people cope. I think I'm really talking a lot about like some of the coping skills that I have, but also like this was part of the journey.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I recreated an Amish dress based on the last two settlements, so two different ones, based
Mhm.
on the last two settlements that I lived in.
Are you wearing that
And
on your book cover?
that's a different one.
A different one?
They're prideful and rebellious. Okay, the first one I call it my disobedient dress, and the second one is my rebellious dress. But like I just made them a little wrong,
Hmm.
and then I also used like one of them I used the right type of fabric, and the other one I used the wrong kind of fabric. Like just
Okay.
even the stitching in one of the dresses is like so wrong. Just so when you have had that level of control,
Hmm.
part of what you have to do, what I had to do, I I had to like actually intentionally challenge myself to learn to make decisions for myself that are reflecting my best interests rather than just whatever people expect of me,
Yeah.
because it's very easy to fall into like pleasing people
Hmm.
as a habit and be like, oh, this will make people happy. But at the end of the day, when you're doing things to make people happy, but you're doing so at the cost of the detriment of yourself and your
Yeah.
own health,
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Absolutely. Hmm.
So I had to like actually do that. And then the other part is I, like I said, I went to all of these different churches. I went all of these different ways. And, you know, I shifted first from like Christianity to spiritual to like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to be more like pagan. I studied Wicca at one point in time.
Hmm.
Nah, that's not for me either.
Not for
Like
me.
I studied Wicca and I was like, that's not for me. This is just the
Hmm.
same thing as Christianity rebranded.
Hmm. Really?
That's it. Yes.
Huh.
The amount of it's I don't even know how to explain it, but like when you start going to new age spaces like that,
Hmm.
what you'll find is that often like people will have like drum circles. Oh, you should give donations to
Okay.
support the drum circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Feel familiar?
Hmm.
Or like, oh, we're going to do this thing, but we need you to give donations for this.
Hmm.
And so there's this thing of like everybody can see who gives or doesn't give because it's a
Yeah.
and I was just like, why are you like this?
Hmm.
Like I do enjoy a good drum circle, but like really, why you gotta like okay. I understand nothing is for free in capitalistic societies, but also I think that capitalism has, you know, we're on the late stages of capitalism, and that is part of the problem. That what's wrong in the world today,
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you on that.
and maybe we should push back on that.
Hmm. So how long so you left, you went through the Christianity. How long did you stick around with the Christianity? How you said you were going to church at first. Did that last
Two
for a few
thousand
years?
seven,
2007.
2007.
So that was about 3 years in the church. And then you moved on from Christian to spirituality.
to spirituality, to paganism, looking at paganism of all
Hmm.
different flavors,
Hmm.
but Wicca. Yeah, I
So
started with Wicca. So,
you consider yourself atheist at this point?
yes.
So are you just? I had someone I spoke with yesterday that said that they felt they were atheist to just the gods of any book or any religion, but they still feel that there's still a God, but they don't really like to use the term God. Where are
Oh,
you at in all that?
I don't believe there's sufficient evidence to support a God. So, unless you provide me with that, I don't
Right.
believe God exists.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. Because my thing is, it doesn't matter what it doesn't matter what if you believe what I believe or if I believe what you believe. It's okay.
Right.
My the thing that I always say, I say that I don't believe in the God of the Bible, and there's nobody that's going to send me to hell for not believing that. And I can believe whatever I want to believe because it's okay. Nobody's going to punish me for believing the wrong thing, basically.
Yet,
And yeah,
I will say this is a lot of times, like our nervous systems, when we grow up in high control religions, we have specific rituals that
mhm,
are like soothing to our nervous system because they tell us
yeah,
we're safe, right?
yeah.
So, like, one of the things that I did is I unbaptized myself.
Okay. So how did that work? What does that look like?
I think it can look however you need it to look like, but also, we were baptized wrongly according to many different people because we were only sprinkled. And also,
Um,
according to the Mennonites, because we were baptized with our covering off, that was not the most holiest of baptisms. And
mm,
also, it was sprinkled water, not poured. I mean, it was poured water, not sprinkled. So that was wrong too. I
mm.
digress. Like, did you know there's a more holier form of baptism?
I mean, I was sprinkled first, and then years later, I felt like I needed to be immersed. So
Oh, I
yes,
was
I
so
was
almost
sprinkled in
almost
Methodist.
drowning.
Yeah, so I was
You had the
sprinkled in the
holiest of
Methodist
the
church. I
holiest
did,
baptisms.
I
You
did.
were
I was
just like, oh,
yeah,
oh, come into me, Lord. Never mind.
yeah, and I did it with my children. Yeah. Yes, so I was sprinkled and then I was, submerged or immersed or whatever you want to call it. So yeah. Yeah, I did it. I did it a couple of times. So
I
yeah.
only did it once because every time my church started getting too much into the, well, you have to get baptized or you have to tithe or
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
whatever, it was like, no. Or when they wanted me to wear skirts, I was like,
Hmm. Yeah.
good luck.
Yeah. One of my children said they miss going to church and they would like to go to church, but they don't want to go to church enough to where people start trying to, get them to do things like. And she was like, that's what happens once you go. They're gonna want you to get on this board or that board or do this or do that. And she said, I'm just not doing that. So she just doesn't go at all. Yeah.
That's literally that's a lot of people talk about community, but I will say this now. The longer I've been out and in this journey, the more groups I've found that are um, creating space for people like me to exist.
Hmm.
I always say I'm an Amish misfit because I don't
Hmm.
quite fit in because there's the things, all of these things that impact how I see life and how I
Right.
navigate my life.
Right.
And how I connect with people. Like, even just the educational portion can affect how you connect with people because
Hmm.
when you have a specific type of education that doesn't encompass like all of the things that other people from this supposed, same place have, um, people often connect over like shared childhood memories of school or
Hmm.
movies or TV. We don't
Right.
have that.
Right.
Our school was not public school. Like our curriculum was literally moderated by church beliefs. Like,
Yeah.
and this was sanctioned by the United States government
Mhm.
in a court ruling called Wisconsin versus Yoder. Like, that makes it very, very difficult sometimes to feel like you belong in a world where everybody else pretty much went to public school or they went
Right.
to a private school that had like, a regular curriculum where they
Hmm.
actually learn science.
Yeah. So science wasn't part of your curriculum, I assume.
No, I didn't even know what a black hole was the first time somebody asked me.
Yeah.
But I have went to college. I will be very proud of that. I would say I went to college.
Awesome.
I got an
Awesome.
associate's degree. It's not much,
Yeah.
but it's more education than anybody in my entire family has.
Yeah. Well, that's something to be proud of. That's something to be proud of. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah. And I think, um, you know, part of that is that now we have more groups like Recovering from Religion. I know that
Hmm.
Janice Selby, who hosts the Divorcing Religion podcast,
Yeah.
and Shameless Sexuality Conference. You might want to look her up.
I was looking for a pen, so I was going to
She
write that down.
she just recently published a book too,
Uh-huh.
Divorcing Religion, her memoir. It's amazing. She's a registered counselor in Canada, and I know that her and some of the people that I know through her are working on like creating a trauma recovery center for religious trauma recovery. And so that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And what is her name?
Janice Selby.
Okay. I'll look her up.
And then there's another one. Oh, the Secular Therapy Project. That didn't used to exist, but it does now.
Hmm.
And the thing about Recovering from Religion is that they have online groups that meet. If you go on meetup.com, you can like find them. There's also the Vashti Initiative, which is like for people who are deconstructing. There's just so many different groups now. Now we have a
Yeah.
little bit of variety in the spice of the atheist life.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't realize that all of that was out there.
Yes, totally check them out.
Yeah, absolutely will. For sure. So, we're getting a little uh we're past an hour now, so I just want to ask you what else is there anything else you would like to share um before we go?
Well, I would just say if you're in an abusive situation, know that it's not your fault. It doesn't matter what your religion says, it doesn't matter what people in your religion say. When
Hmm.
somebody is physically harming you and deliberately harming you, that is a choice that they're making. It's not
Hmm.
the devil leading them astray, it's them choosing to do so. And when you say it's the devil leading them astray, what you're actually doing is you're taking accountability off of the perpetrator of crimes and putting it on an invisible being that we don't even have evidence that exists.
Hmm.
Perhaps if we actually started having some form of accountability and rehabilitation that incorporates what we know and goes about doing this from a secular standpoint rather than a biblical based worldview, perhaps the world might be a little bit safer for children and people in the world today.
Yeah.
And also know that you can always, always report abuse. You deserve safety in life. Everybody does. But yeah, like I think also I want people to know that just because people tell you you will never amount to anything doesn't mean that those people actually are correct.
That's right.
You are a whole valid human being.
Absolutely. I agree with all of that.
And I think that's pretty much it. That's all I got right now.
Yeah. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. I know that everything we talked about was not easy for you, and you're very, like I said earlier, you're very strong. You're very resilient, and and very happy that I got to talk with you. I'm grateful that you took the time to come and talk with me and share with
Thank
me.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you very much for inviting me and for having me. And also thank you for reading my book. It makes it so much easier for me and puts so much less labor on me when people do actually take the time to learn a
mhm.
little bit.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it means a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely I do my research. I try to do my research. I don't just want to have somebody come on here and I just don't have a clue what's going on.
That makes sense.
Yeah, which like I said, I'm new to this. I'm all new to this, and I'm enjoying it very much so far. I'm enjoying all the meeting new people,
Hmm.
and it's been very it's been very enjoyable for me doing this ad.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah,
What is the most shocking thing that you have encountered by doing this?
shocking. Um, let's see. Mm, mm. Well, Deborah's book. When I read her book, and it's talking about King David and Jonathan. I think his name is Jonathan. Was it Jonathan? And
Are you,
Saul.
yeah.
So yeah, and their relationship. that, all the times I've read uh, about King David, I never interpreted it in the way that it was in her book. That was, I think, that was the most shocking thing to me.
You were just like, are you for real right now? What are you doing?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, but think about it. Like we can all like we can read the Bible and have all kinds of interpretations of it, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's why, when it says God is not the author of confusion, then why are there so many different interpretations? Why does everybody have their own interpretation? If that's not confusing, I don't know what confusing is.
And
Yeah.
then you have people who say the Bible doesn't justify abuse. And then you have people who say, oh, but free will was given. Oh, but, and there's
Hmm.
all of this apologistic language.
Yeah. 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 And then, of course, I've been talking and hearing a lot about the whole slavery component lately. Um, so the Bible absolutely does endorse slavery. There's no way around it at all. And that's what gave people felt like that's what gave them the right to enslave people was because it was in the Bible, and it made them feel like that it was okay to do that.
My mom wouldn't give a black cashier money or take money from her hand, which is part of Amish shunning in our 18 articles of confession, the Dordrecht articles of confession, because she said that this was the mark of hand.
Mm. So you couldn't even take money from them. Can't even go through the checkout line.
This was in the 1990s in Pennsylvania. Yes. Oh, she went through the checkout line. She just wouldn't take money from her hand.
Oh, she had to put it on the counter. Oh,
Couldn't hand her money either because that's just, it's the
yeah.
same thing they do to me now because I'm now that person
Right, right.
because I've been shunned. Yeah. So, like you said, like slavery is condoned in the Bible.
Hmm. Along with a whole bunch of other bad stuff. And
So,
it's just amazing that we looked over those things and thought nothing of it when we were in it, in the midst of religion.
do you think it's the indoctrination that teaches us?
Hmm.
Because I feel like it's all by design. It's created in a very specific way to
Yeah,
maintain so that certain people can maintain their positions of power. And
yeah,
always comes down to money somehow.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. I believe the whole construct of the church is based on power, um, and greed. That's basically what it's about: power and money. The whole
Yeah.
construct, and there may be, maybe good churches in your little towns or whatever. These churches here in my town, I don't think of any of these churches as being bad. They're not. I don't think of them as being bad.
Hmm.
I don't think of the preachers as being bad. My mother was a preacher. My mother was a pastor for many years. She wasn't a bad person. But the whole, just the construct of the church was initially intentionally built for power. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a really good way of putting it. It was
Mhm.
built for power.
Yeah. I
But
wholeheartedly
thank you.
believe that. Yes. Thank you
Thank
too.
you.